As I say, hey, open your mouth, maybe you think to yourself, why? I don't know what to say. If I open my mouth, what is my neighbor going to think about me? Who cares what your neighbor thinks about you? Who cares what your neighbor doesn't need what you need. Your neighbor doesn't have maybe the issues that you're struggling with. And so when we have those times where we really go in, I want to hear you. Matter of fact, forget me. Your God wants to hear from you. I said, your God wants to hear from you. Amen. Amen. I want to welcome everyone joining us here today in person, as well as those that are joining us online. We have been in a teaching series called By Faith. Has anybody enjoyed this series? Come on, somebody. We've been in this teaching series called By Faith, and today we are on part 4 of this series that I truly believe is going to help everyone in this house grow in their faith. Now, you might have seen that the lights came on around here, and you're like, oh, what in the world is going on here? I just want to let you know, the reason why we started turning the lights on during this teaching time is because there were some people who were saying that they have a hard time taking notes with the lights off. And so you all know that those that take notes go to heaven. So we want everybody in here to go to heaven, and so that's why we turn the lights on. Amen? Amen. Amen. We're closing out today's series in a major way with a teaching I'm calling, There Are Levels to This Thing. There are levels to this thing. Matter of fact, I want you to look at your neighbor and tell them there are levels to this thing. Not with an I, with an A. There are levels to this thing. To this thing. There are levels to this thing. Yeah. There are levels to this thing called faith. When I was a kid, like a lot of young boys, I liked video games. But there were a certain type of video games that I wouldn't play, particularly video games that came with levels, right? Like when I say levels, like remember you used to play Super Mario Brothers, right? And when you were playing the little, Luigi, you were Luigi or whatever. Can you hear me now? When you were playing the game, if you got really good at it, you'd move from level 1 to level 2 to level 3, and eventually, if you kept doing that, you would eventually win the game. But for me, while that might have made some other boys excited, that never excited me. Because for me, I didn't have the patience for it. So what my mom would do is she'd buy me a game, and about 3 weeks later, I'd be like, Mom, I need a new game. And she'd be like, well, what happened to the game that I just bought you? Oh, I was done with that game. In my mind, I had already came, saw, and conquered. What do we need that game for anymore? That's the past. I'm trying to move on to the future. Amen? And so for me, I was like, man, this levels thing is just not for me. As I was thinking about this message today, I couldn't help but think that our faith is very similar to video games with levels. Now, of course, there are no numbers to the levels. Of course, when you conquer one level, it doesn't mean that the next level is going to be more difficult, just different, right? But there are levels to faith. In fact, maybe you say, well, what is the goal? Like as I move from one level to the next, what do I get? Do I get anything from moving from one level of faith to the next level of faith? And I'll tell you, yes, you get something great. In fact, you get something that money cannot buy. That's a thing called peace. Come on, somebody. As you move from one level of faith to the next level of faith, you get greater levels of peace. There are millions of Americans that are on a search for peace. It's the thing, I don't know, maybe there's somebody in here today that would say, man, I don't need more money. I don't need more relationships. Yeah, I don't need more status in this society. Just give me some peace. Come on, somebody. Just give me the ability to go to sleep at night. In fact, I've asked people before, hey, how many hours of sleep do you get a night? And some people are like 4, 5 hours of sleep. Oh, no, that's not peace. God wants you to have peace. And I would argue that the greatest way for you to get peace is to grow in your faith. Because here's what you have to understand. The more you grow in your faith, the less you have to worry about stuff. Because you're giving it all over to God. So what in the world would I stress out for if I realized that there is a creator of the universe that I give all my problems over to. That's why we got to grow in faith. I told you in the very beginning, if you'll remember, we said that faith is all about trust. It's all about confidence. It's all about reliance in and dependency on. And the reality is, in a church of this size, we have everything in here. We have people who have great faith, and then we have a lot of people who are struggling in their faith. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And then we have everybody in between. In fact, if you come in here and you're like, man, I'm just going to be honest, Pastor, I'm struggling with my faith, I want you to know that's okay. In fact, we always want to make this house a place where you don't have to put on a mask and pretend like you got it all together. Yeah, this is a place where you can be open and honest about your struggles. Oh, I'm struggling with my faith. I'm struggling. Honestly, I don't really trust God right now. That's okay. In fact, one of the things we say around here is, it's okay not to be okay. It's just not okay to stay that way. Like, you can't stay stuck there. It's one thing to say, I have little faith. It's another thing to be walking with the Lord for 20 years and you still have little faith. Are y'all with me on that? And so if you are a person who says, man, I'm really struggling in my faith, my prayer is that as a result of today's message, your faith will go to another level. Everybody say another level. Yeah, there are levels to this thing. When I first started in full-time ministry, my very first supervisor was a pastor by the name of Pastor Brian. Everybody say Pastor Brian. Yeah, Pastor Brian was an older gentleman. In fact, I'll tell you, if you don't have someone older in your life that you're getting some wisdom from, you're missing out. We have this society that kind of discards elderly people. But if you spend some time talking to grandma, grandma knows a whole lot more than you think grandma knows, in Jesus' name. Come on, somebody. Yeah. So Pastor Brian was an older gentleman, and as I got to know Pastor Brian, I was like, man, this guy is different from anybody I've ever met. He would sit down with me and he would share these stories of how he grew up as a child with a learning disability. And the learning disability didn't stay in his childhood. The learning disability went with him into adulthood. And so here he was as an adult, as an elderly person, still struggling with the same learning disability he had when he was a child. In fact, and I'm not saying this, I'm saying this because I'm going somewhere. I'm not saying this to be demeaning or anything like that, but Pastor Brian was never the sharpest guy in the room. He was never the guy that could run intellectual circles around everybody. But one of the things that I loved about Pastor Brian was that he was always the most faithful person in the room. He was always the most faith-filled person in the room. He was always the person that everybody looked to and said, man, I don't get your trust in God. It doesn't make sense. So like, you trust in God about everything? Pastor Brian would say, yeah, absolutely. Pastor Brian knew he couldn't rely on his own intellect. So he had to rely on Jesus for everything. He relied on Jesus for provision. God, if you don't provide for me, I don't know how we're going to make it through, Lord, but I know I trust you. I trust you. Lord, you're going to come through for me. He relied on Jesus when it came to his marriage and his relationship with his kids. He relied on Jesus for, we live in this society where we want corporate advancement. And like everybody's in an office setting and we're like, I want to move up. I want to go to the next level. I want to go to the next level. And eventually I want to be on the top. Pastor Brian never cared about that. For Pastor Brian, he said, God will promote me when God gets ready. Which, by the way, that's how you get peace. Because now you're no longer chasing the thing that you think you need, and you're allowing God to do it his way. Right? And so I always said, man, I want to be like Pastor Brian. He said, Rock, when I grew up, he said, when the kids would pick on me, my mom would tell me, hey, just fall on your knees and call on Jesus. And so I would fall on my knees, I call on Jesus, and the bully would just somehow go away. He said my mom, because we were poor, we were single, my mom was a single mom, he said there were times where we didn't know what we were going to eat, but my mom would pray, and then somehow, like, the food would show up. Like, we didn't know how we were going to pay the lights, and then somehow, like, the light bill would get paid. And so I watched her do that for years, and so I became an adult, and I just kept doing the same thing I saw my mom doing. Which, by the way, let me tell you, if you want your kids to have great faith, you got to start having great faith. It starts with you. They're going to do what they see you do. If they see you model a lack of faith, they're going to have a lack of faith. If they see you trust in and depend on yourself, they're going to trust in and depend on themselves. But if they see you fall on your knees and cry out to Jesus when stuff ain't right, and then they see a miracle happen, they say, oh, there might be something to mommy and daddy's faith. I don't know. There's something to this thing. So many kids are right now walking away from the faith. I wonder how many less kids would walk away from the faith if they saw their parents actually having faith. So in 2018, Pastor Brian was diagnosed with dementia. And this was the type of dementia that would eventually lead to Alzheimer's. And so I ran into him not too long after the diagnosis, and I said, hey, Pastor Brian, man, I am so sorry to hear about your diagnosis. And he looked at me with a smile on his face, and I was like, why is he smiling? And he says, man, Rock, I'm not worried about that, man. I trust God more than I do a diagnosis. Now, I'm just going to be honest with you. I'm your pastor, okay? Can I be real with you for a minute? If I was diagnosed with dementia, that probably won't be my response, okay? But he said, I trust God more than I do the doctor. I trust God more than I do the diagnosis. He says, look, man, in fact, I got 10 years left, according to the doctor. And he says, man, as far as I'm concerned, it's a win-win because I'm going to party for the next 10 years, and then I'm going to go to eternity and be with Jesus, and then it's going to be a real party for all of eternity. Come on, somebody. I said, man, that's the kind of faith I want. Can I tell you something? If you want to be a person of great faith, you got to get around people of great faith. And you got to follow them closely. In fact, there's this idea of following Jesus. Jesus, he used to wear flip-flops around because they didn't have, Nikes like what we got today, right? So he would wear flip-flops around. And this idea of following Jesus is like, I want to be so close to Jesus that as Jesus walks, the stuff on the bottom of his flip-flops flips up onto me. Come on, somebody. In the same way, when you have someone that God has placed in your life that's of great faith, you need to get behind that person and follow them so closely that whatever is on them gets on you. Maybe you've been missing out on opportunities in life because you've been trying to chart a path on your own. You need to stop trying to be a trailblazer, and you need to find people of faith, get behind them, and do what they do. When they take a step, you take a step. When they move, you move. Just like that. When I move, you move. Just like that. I remember when my wife and I first got married, I didn't know what it meant to be married. There was never in my life a successful marriage that I could point to in my childhood. So I didn't know what it meant to be married. And so what I did was I got into the church and I started looking at guys, how they loved their wives. And when they bought their wives roses, I bought my wife roses. When they hugged their wife, I'd hug my wife. I didn't know what to do. I didn't need to be a trailblazer. I just needed to find people who were already doing it well and get behind them. It's the same when it comes to your faith. You need to find people and just get behind them. Just copy them. Stop trying to chart your own path. Are you with me on that? Look at what the Apostle Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 1. Follow my example as I follow Christ. Follow my example as I follow the example of Christ. In other words, another translation says, follow me as I follow Christ. Paul says, just get behind me. Just get behind me. You don't need to create your own. You don't need to figure out your own. You just need to get behind me. So often, as Christians, we'll say, well, I hear from God on my own, and so I'm just going to do this thing by myself. No, you weren't designed to do this thing by yourself. You were designed to do this thing in community with other people. Not only, I told you last week, will God speak to you, but he'll speak to you through other people. And if you go off on this path of, well, I'm just going to go on what I feel and what I believe God said to me, you're going to end up sadly mistaken. You need other people. Are you with me on that? If your faith is going to grow, you got to get around people of great faith. If your faith is going to grow, you got to get around people of great faith. There are levels to this thing. If you're always around people who have little faith, you will have little faith yourself. If you're only around people who are self-reliant, you will be self-reliant. If you're only around people who can see things in the physical, but they don't have the ability to see in the spiritual, you will only see in the physical. You won't be able to see in the spiritual. Are you with me? You need to get around some people of great faith. This is one of the reasons why we do groups here at Expansion Church. We do groups because we want you to do life around other people. And are all of them going to have great faith? No. But there might be one or two in your group. And that's a person that you can say, you know what? I want to follow that person. In some cases, maybe there's some people that are in certain, they trust God more in certain areas of their life than others. Maybe there's a person who trusts God more in their finances. And you say, okay, I'm going to follow you from a financial perspective. But then the other person, they trust God more with their marriage. And so I'm going to follow you from a marital perspective. But the answer is not, I'm just going to do this on my own. Are you with me on that? You got to get around the right people in order for your faith to flourish. I've had the opportunity to be around people that were believing God for a miracle in their lives. They're praying for a miracle. And you hear it and you're like, at first, you hear it. I'm thinking back like 10 years ago. I'd hear it and I'm like, I don't really know. But then God shows up and does the miracle. And guess what that does for my faith? Oh, it increases my faith. Because now I'm like, oh my goodness, I didn't even believe that God would actually show up and do that. And then he shows up and he does it in their life. So then I say to myself, if he did it in their life, then he'll do it in my life. Why? Because the Bible says that God is not a respecter of persons. If he does it for them, then he'll also do it for me. Which is one of the reasons why we don't have to run around jealous of what other people have. You got another car? You ain't even need a house that big. Y'all went on another vacation? Where y'all went this time? No, you don't have to be jealous of what other people have, because the same God that did it for them will do it for you. So the best thing for you to do is to celebrate when God does something in their life, because when he does it in their life, you're like, oh, mine is coming soon. Come on, somebody. My marriage might not be where my marriage needs to be, but if you just did it in his and her life, you'll do it in my marriage as well. There's a saying that goes, show me your friends, and I'll show you your future. Who you around? Who you around? I told our leadership team that one of the things we've got to do a better job of is communicating the stories of miracles that happen in this house. This is a house of miracles. There are people being set free from all types of things. There are marriages that are broken that are being put back together. And I don't know that we've done the best job of communicating the miracles. I told our team, I said, listen, in order for people to know that this is a house of miracles, we've got to start sharing the miracles that are happening. And as we share the miracles that are happening, people will begin to be built up in faith and say, man, if God did it in this person's life, I know him, I know her. Oh, man, she's a mess just like me. He's a mess just like me. If God would do it in his life and her life, then God will do it in my life. And then all together, we all rise in faith. It's kind of like in Northern California, I had the opportunity to take my family to Lake Tahoe. Well, we went to San Francisco first, and then we went to Lake Tahoe. So we had this choice. We could either go to San Francisco and then go north to the Redwood Forest, or we can go east to Lake Tahoe. We chose to go east, but we said the next time we go back, we're going to go to the Redwood Forest. In the Redwood Forest, they have the tallest trees on the planet. These trees grow to be as tall as 300 feet tall. Right? They get so big that you can drive a car through the tree, okay? Humongous trees. And so you would naturally think that a tree that's that big must have a really deep root system. But you'd be wrong. They don't have deep roots. In fact, they have some of the most shallow roots of any trees on the planet. So how are they able to support such a large rate? Glad you asked. What they do is they grow wide, and then the roots will actually wrap around the roots of the tree next to them. And so this tree will lock a hold to that tree, and that tree will lock a hold to that tree, and they get stronger because the whole forest is all connected together. That's a picture of God's church. When God does a miracle in your life and then you share it, and then God does a miracle in this person's life and then they share it, all of us together grow in faith. Our faith gets stronger together. Are y'all with me on that? I told our team, I said, we got to swap out the Connect cars. So if you notice in the seat backs, there are brand new Connect cars in there. And these Connect cards are not just for new people. On the back of the Connect card, we've always had a place where people can put prayer requests. However, on the back of the card, we decided to change the game up. Instead of just having prayer requests, on the back of the card, you can now put a praise report as well. So in other words, not only can you put a prayer that you're believing God for, but you can also put on there when God shows up and answers the prayer. And I want you to know I'm going to do a better job of making sure that I'm communicating with the whole church what God did in your life. And then as I communicate what God did in your life, then the other person is going to share what God did in their life, and then the other person is going to share what God did in their life. And as we do that, we're going to all be locking arms like those trees. And together we're all going to grow in faith. Amen? Are you with me on that? So in Matthew chapter 8, we see this story of Jesus and the disciples. They've been doing ministry all day long, and now they're tired. They get on a boat. It's nighttime. They go out to the middle of this humongous lake, and then all of a sudden, a storm comes along. As the storm comes along, they get scared. And this is what happens when they get scared. Look at Matthew chapter 8, verse 20. Actually, that's in 25. We don't have 25. Let me give you some more context. They get scared. They go and they tell Jesus, hey, Jesus, we're about to die. Why? Because whenever things happen in our life, we always go to worst case scenario. Oh, I can't pay my lights. I'm going to die, right? So they tell Jesus, we're going to die. And Jesus, the Bible says, is sleeping with his head on a pillow, drooling. I don't know if you know, Jesus drooled too. So if you're a drooler, welcome home. Jesus drooled too, okay? The Bible doesn't say that. We're adding that. Read your Bible, okay? Read your Bible. So now this is what happens when he gets woken up. Jesus responded, why are you afraid? You have so little faith. You have such little faith. Like, y'all have been rolling with me for months now. You've seen me turn water into wine. You've watched me take and heal the lame. People that couldn't walk got up in front of you and walked away. You've seen me take people who are blind and make them see, but you still have little faith. I wonder how often God looks at us, and here we are complaining about our marriage being in the dumps, and then we don't have the faith to believe that God can actually turn it around. God is like, man, you've seen me do this over and over and over again. You've seen me turn marriage after marriage after marriage around, but you don't have the faith to believe I can turn your marriage around? Think about the person who's struggling with some kind of addiction. You've seen God heal person after person after person from an addiction. You've even seen God heal people with your exact addiction. But then you don't have the faith to believe that God can actually heal your addiction. I want you to know that not only can he, but he will. Because I think that's what some of us struggle with. We believe he can. We believe he has the power to. We just don't believe he would want to do it in our life. And I want you to know that not only can he do it in your life, but he will do it in your life. Amen? Okay, so this is what happened. Then he got up and he rebuked the wind and waves, and suddenly there was great calm. Could you imagine that? Could you imagine being the disciples? You're panicked. You're having fear because you think you're going to die. You wake Jesus up, and he stands up, and he tells the waves and the wind, stop, and they all stop. Could you imagine that? You would think that at that moment, that would grow your faith to a place where it never happened again, right? No, because it happened again in Scripture. Look at Matthew chapter 14. In fact, it was similar circumstances to the last one. It was nighttime. They're in the boat on the same lake. And the same thing happens, which tells me this. When God sends you a test and you fail it, he's going to send you the same test over again and over again and over again. Some of us have been in remedial classes for a mighty long time, okay? Yeah. It's just how it works. He's going to keep sending you the same test over and over and over again, giving you an opportunity to pass. Why does this keep happening to me? Because you fail every time. That's why it keeps happening. God's trying to grow you in your faith. But you can't grow in your faith if you can't pass the test. Look at what happens in Matthew chapter 14, verse number 28. And Peter answered him, Lord, if it's you, command me to come out on the water. Okay, so here it's dark, it's raining, the wind and the waves begin kicking up. This time, Jesus isn't on the boat. This time, Jesus comes walking up to the boat on water. And the disciples look at him and they're like, man, Jesus, like I knew you was the man, but like you walk on water too? It's in the Bible. You got to read it. And Peter says, Jesus, if it's you, can I get out the boat and walk on water too? And Jesus tells him, chum on. It says that. Chum on. And he gets out the boat and he begins walking on water. And this is what happens. Verse number 30. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid and beginning to sink. He cried out, Lord, save me. Jesus immediately reached out his hand and took hold of him, saying to him, oh, you of little faith. Oh, mind you, Peter was there the first time. Peter saw when Jesus calmed the waves the first time, but he still was scared because we're human. You know, so often we look at people in Scripture and we're like, I can't believe they did that, but we do the same thing, right? Here's the thing I never want. I never want Jesus to look at me and say, oh, Rock, you got little faith. Little teeny weeny faith. You're like a little baby faith. No, I want God to look at me and say, man, he's got great faith. He's got great faith. My wife, oftentimes, when it comes to the gas in my car, has a lot to say. So I've got this habit. I don't think it's a bad habit. It works for me. It might not work for everybody else, but it works for me. I've got this habit of when the light comes on in my car saying I need to go and get some gas, for her, that is an opportunity to panic. For me, that means I got 40 miles left, baby. Come on, somebody. I got a whole 40 miles left. Yeah. You know how far I can go on 40 miles? I can get to Detroit, Michigan on 40 miles. Come on, somebody. Yeah. So here's my logic. This is my logic. My logic is, okay, I'm going to wait until it gets to 2 miles. Then when I go to the gas station, it's really a fill up. See, some of y'all call it a fill up. It ain't a fill up. This is a real fill up, okay? Here's my thinking. This is my thinking. My thinking is I got just enough gas. Like I have just enough. I'm good. I got just enough. But the problem is a lot of us look at our faith the same way. Like I got just enough faith. Like, no, I don't have great faith, but I got just enough faith. Like, let me prove to you Peter had just enough faith. If Peter didn't have any faith, he wouldn't have asked Jesus, could he walk on water? See, Peter gets a bad rap because we look at the whole story and all we think about is the fact that, oh, Peter, you didn't have faith and then you sunk. But we forget the fact that there were other disciples that stayed in the boat when he decided to get out of the boat. I don't know, maybe God is speaking to somebody right here and saying, you've been in the boat for too long. It's time for you to have some faith and step out of the boat. I don't know what your boat is, but maybe God is calling you to step out of the boat. Peter had faith. He just had little faith. He had just enough faith. But if there's anything in your life that you want to be running around on just enough, it's not faith. No. Because when things happen in your life, the only thing you're going to have to fall back on is your faith. And so you need to have mighty faith. Faith like this woman found in Luke chapter 21. Here you have a woman who's a widow. Jesus has just preached a message in the temple to Jewish people. He's preaching to them the gospel of Jesus Christ. This would have been revolutionary at the time. He preaches this message, and when he's done preaching, they begin to take up an offering, similar to how we take up an offering at the end of service here. And they're bringing their tithes They're offering to the Lord, and they're dropping it into this bucket. And this is what happened. It says, Jesus looked up, and he saw the rich putting their gifts into the treasury. And he saw also a certain poor widow putting in 2 mites. 2 mites would have been, that was their form of currency. It was like, it would be the equivalent of you putting 2 quarters into the offering basket. It says, so he said, truly, I say to you that this poor widow has put in more than all. For all of these gave out of their abundance and have put in, I don't know if that's written right. All these out of their abundance have put in offerings for God. That is written right. But she out of her poverty put in all the livelihood that she had. In other words, what Jesus is saying is, yeah, the other people, yeah, they gave, but they had a lot to give. That doesn't take faith. What takes faith is for a woman to be a widow, be on a fixed income, struggling to figure out how she's going to keep her lights paid, because they had lights 2,000 years ago. How she's going to keep her lights paid. How she's going to make sure her grandkids have clothes for school. How she's going to make sure that she has food in her mouth and in the mouth of her kids and her grandkids. And this woman had enough faith to say, I'm going to give you the last of what I got, God. That's faith. That takes trust. But so many of us, with what we have, we're like, oh, I got to hold on to this. And God's like, yeah, I know. I figured. Because you don't, see, when it comes to actually giving, it's not a finance issue. It's a faith issue. The question is, do you trust God enough? Or do you trust you? I've just gotten to a place where I just realized that I got to stop trusting me and I got to start trusting God. Like, because I know me. Like, do you know you? You done got yourself in some stuff. Yeah, I think the question is, do you have the faith to believe that God will provide? This woman had the faith to believe that God would provide, and Jesus pointed out her of all the people and said, that woman right there, she's got great faith. When God looks at me, I want him to say, oh, man, he really trusts me. Oh, man, he's real dependent on me, which, by the way, that actually activates God to move on your behalf. Is it possible that the reason why God hasn't been moving on your behalf is because he's sitting back waiting for you to tag him in? See, you've been in the ring trying to do everything on your own, so he just sits back and watches you. But it's when you have faith that God says, oh, man, he really wants me to move on his behalf. Tag me in. Let's go. I want to be a person of great faith, and so should you. All right, so maybe you're saying, all right, I want to grow in faith. Okay, so I need to have the right people around me. What else, Pastor? What else? Next thing I want you to write down, if you want to be a person of faith, if you want your faith to grow, your faith has to be tested. Like, if you want your faith to grow, your faith is going to be tested. It's not going to feel good all the time. But isn't it true that a lot of the things in our life that don't feel good are actually good for us? Like, think about when you go to the dentist. That is a horrible experience. Oh, it's the worst. It doesn't feel good, but it's very good for you. I have a friend, my wife and I have a couple friend, John and Heather. They met some years ago, and they fell in love and decided to get married. And when it was time for them to have kids, they began to consult with the doctor. And the reason they consulted with the doctor was because Heather had grown up her whole life having epileptic seizures. And her seizures were really violent and really traumatic. In fact, there was one time where she was driving and she had a seizure while driving, wrecked the car, almost killed herself, and potentially could have killed other people on the road that day. So when they're thinking about having a baby, they go and they have a conversation with the doctor. And the doctor says, no, I don't think you guys should ever have a child. And there are two reasons why I don't think you should have a child. Number one, if you have a child or get pregnant and you have one of these seizures, the seizure could end the pregnancy. But number two, even if that works out, the medication that I have you on to try to keep the seizures down is so strong that it can actually have impact on the baby. So for those reasons, I wouldn't recommend that you have a child. That was the test. Y'all with me? That was the test. So they started to think about, way back in the days, they had talked about one day, maybe, I don't know, adopting a child. So they started to look at what it would look like to go through the adoption process. Which, by the way, some of us, you've been standing at a door for 20 years trying to kick that door down. And I believe maybe God is saying it's time to go find the open door. Like, I have an open door for you. So what they did was they left and they went to go find the open door. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't have faith and believe the door will be open, but I am saying that you need to spend time with God because it might be possible that the door is closed for a reason. Are you with me on that? So they leave that door. They go looking at the door of fostering. So they get their first foster child. In their minds, he's going to be their forever child. They're going to adopt him and ride off into the sunset. Well, a couple years after bringing this child into their home, the state comes and takes him out of the home and said, we're going to place him with a relative of his. Oh, they were devastated because they were like, man, we put everything into this. We just wanted to be able to adopt this child and give him a forever home. And, But they didn't quit because it was just a test. They didn't quit. So they brought another child into their home. This one was a little girl. And so they bring the little girl into their house and they give this girl a home. And the little girl, by year one, they're able to adopt this little girl. And so it was like this huge celebration, and we were all excited, and it was like, whoa. Then they get a call from Miami. The little girl's mother has gotten pregnant with another, or has given birth to another child. And she can't care for this second child either. So she says, there's this family that lives up in Port St. Lucie. And they have my first child. I'd love for you to figure out where they're at and give her my second child. So they call Heather and they call John and they say, hey, listen, you got to come get this child by the end of the day today. Can you make it to Miami by the end of the day today? They had to pray about it and then quickly make a decision, and they got in the car and they drove down to Miami to pick up child number 2. They adopt child number 2 just a couple months later. So now they got 2 little girls, and they started out with 0. Then they get a call one day, and the next call was from the aunt of the first boy. She was the one who took the first boy in. And the aunt of the first boy said, I've got this boy and I got all his brothers and sisters and I can't take care of all these kids. Could you do me a favor? Could you come get this little boy? And could you give him a home? And so the boy that they thought they had lost forever, they now bring this little boy in. And we've got a picture of them here. And now they're this incredible family. Come on, y'all. And I know what you're thinking. I wasn't expecting to see that. But here's what you got to understand. That's a part of the test. Because, see, as we've gotten to know them, one of the things we realized about them was that they grew up in this all-white context. They didn't really understand the struggle of being black in America. It didn't really make any sense to them. But as a result of them being obedient, as a result of them passing the test, now they have the opportunity to not only give these young people a healthy home to grow up in, but now they're learning things that they would have never learned otherwise. If your faith is going to grow, you're going to have to pass the test. The thing I love about God is, like I said before, if you fail the test, it's okay. He'll just put you in remedial classes. You'll just take the same test over and over and over again. The last thing I want to share with you is this as we close. If you want your faith to grow, it's going to take time. I know we live in this microwave society. ding, it's ready. But when it comes to your faith, it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to be a quick solution. It's going to be something that you're going to have to be intentional about. My dad, you all know, just passed away not too long ago, and my dad had this love affair with plants, okay? Some people do dogs, some people have cats. My dad did plants, okay? I don't know this to be the case, but I'd like to think he talked to the plants as well, okay? He had plants inside, he had plants outside, he had plants everywhere. Now, there was a difference between the plants that were inside and the plants that were outside, because the plants that were outside, they needed something different from the plants that were inside. The plants that were outside, not only did they need lots of sunlight, but they also needed water, lots of it. The water comes from rain. Can I tell you something? When it comes to your faith, you're going to need some rain in order to make that thing grow. In fact, you're going to need lots of rain in order to make that thing grow. In fact, I would challenge you to begin to welcome the rain. What a crazy idea. I know we don't like pain because it doesn't feel good, but the reality is it's very good for us. The thing that you think is the worst thing that could have ever happened to you ever, it's just rain. It's just rain. It's the thing that God is wanting to send to you to help you grow. And you're not going to grow in one rainy season. It's going to take multiple rainy seasons in order for you to grow to be the person that God has called you to be. Not only do you need, like I said, the pain, the test, the trial, the struggle, but you're also going to need people. I want to challenge you all. We've got a group connect happening next week and the following week after service. If you're going to grow in your faith, you got to get around other people that are growing in their faith. And so I'm going to challenge you to step out and join a group. And then after 2 weeks, don't come to me and say, well, it's been 2 weeks, my faith hasn't grown yet. Your faith isn't going to grow in 2 weeks. It's going to take years of you being consistent in order for your faith to grow and for you to become a giant in the faith. Are you with me on that? Some people look at faith and they're like, man, I went to the gym and I went for 2 weeks and I don't have a six-pack yet. Yeah, no, that's not how it works. In the same way, you doing the right things over time, I guarantee you, will cause your faith to grow. There are levels to this thing. There are levels to this thing. And if you're right down here, don't worry. If you're intentional,